Let's go Ravens! What if I told you the Baltimore Ravens may have just made a silent decision that could define their entire season, and most fans didn't even realize it was happening? There's a move they didn't make, a player they didn't sign, and a chain reaction that's now putting this roster in a very interesting and risky position. Because while everyone was focused on the draft picks, the new names, and the excitement around the team, something bigger was unfolding behind the scenes. A proven weapon was right there within reach, a player who has already hurt this team before, and yet, the Ravens stepped back. Now the question is, did they just trust their plan, or did they just pass on something that could have taken this offense to another level? The answer isn't as simple as it looks, and once you start connecting all the pieces, you'll see why this situation is way more serious than people think. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you hit that like button right now if you truly believe in this team and what they're building. And I want to see the real ones in the comments. Drop something like, "We're going all the way this season," if you're staying optimistic about the Ravens no matter what happens. Because what we're about to break down might change how you see this roster completely. The buzz started when David Njoku, a player who has caused real problems for the Ravens over the years, suddenly became available. We're talking about a tight end who has consistently shown athleticism, speed, and the ability to make acrobatic catches in key moments. Ravens fans know this very well because he's done it against Baltimore multiple times. For a lot of people watching this unfold, the reaction was immediate. Bring him in, no hesitation. And honestly, it made sense at first glance. The Ravens already have Mark Andrews as the clear number one option at tight end, but adding someone like Njoku as a second option? That would give the team one of the most dangerous tight end duos in the league. The idea of having a proven former TE1 as your TE2 is the kind of depth that championship teams usually rely on. But then things started to shift. Instead of making that move, the Ravens chose patience. They didn't rush into signing Njoku after bringing him in for a visit back in March. They waited, and that decision became much clearer once the draft came and went. Not only did Baltimore pass on adding Njoku, but they doubled down at the position by drafting two tight ends. Matthew Hibner came in during the 4th round, projected as a pass-catching option who can contribute in the receiving game. Then Josh Case followed in the 5th round, bringing a more balanced skill set as a hybrid player who can both block and catch. That's a clear message from the front office. They're investing in youth and development at the position. Now look at the full picture. You've got Mark Andrews locked in. You've got Durham Smythe, who already has familiarity with the system through Declan Doyle. And now you add 2 rookies to the mix. That's already 4 tight ends on the roster before even considering any additional moves. So where does that leave David Njoku? At this point, it's starting to look like the door may be closing. Reports surfaced that he's visiting the Chargers, and if that move happens, Baltimore may not even get another chance to revisit the situation. But even if they did, you have to ask, does it still make sense? Because here's the reality, NFL rosters are limited. You only get 53 spots. Adding a 5th tight end isn't just about stacking talent, it's about sacrificing depth somewhere else. That could mean 1 less wide receiver, 1 less running back, 1 less defensive player. And for a team with playoff ambitions, every single roster spot matters. There's also a bigger philosophical shift happening here. The Ravens are expected to lean more into tight end usage this season, especially after moving away from the fullback role. That suggests more formations, more versatility, and more reliance on this position group. But even with that in mind, carrying 5 tight ends might be pushing things too far. At the same time, it's hard to ignore what Njoku could bring. This is still a player who can contribute immediately. This is still someone who has proven he can perform at a high level. And for a team trying to maximize its offensive potential, adding that kind of weapon is always tempting. The tension keeps building behind the scenes, and if you really read between the lines, it feels like the Ravens may have already made their decision without saying it out loud. This wasn't just about passing on David Njoku once, this was a full commitment to a different direction at the tight end position, and everything they've done since backs that up. Because think about it, when a team drafts not 1 but 2 tight ends in the same class, that's not accidental. That's not just adding depth. That's planning for the future while also shaping the present. Matthew Hibner isn't just coming in to sit, he's expected to contribute as a pass catcher. Josh Case brings that hybrid versatility that modern offenses love. These are intentional fits for what the Ravens want to become offensively. And that's where this gets really interesting. We're looking at a team that's clearly trying to evolve. Moving away from the traditional fullback role, leaning more into tight end heavy looks, creating mismatches. This is about building an offense that can adapt week to week. And in that system, chemistry and development matter just as much as raw talent. Bringing in a veteran like Njoku might raise the ceiling in the short term, but it could also disrupt the balance they're trying to build. At the same time, there's no denying what you'd be passing up. Njoku is not just another name. He's a player who has proven he can perform under pressure, a player who has already shown he can be a nightmare matchup. And when you're trying to get over the hump and make a real Super Bowl push, sometimes those are the exact moves that separate contenders from champions. But here's the part that Ravens fans really need to pay attention to. This isn't just about tight ends. This is about trust in the front office's vision. Because if you look at everything that's happened this offseason, from the draft strategy to the coaching changes mentioned in the discussion, there's a clear pattern. The Ravens are building something specific. They're not just reacting to what's available, they're sticking to a plan. And that plan seems to prioritize younger, moldable talent over established veterans in certain positions. We've seen this approach before. Sometimes it pays off big. Other times, you look back and wonder if one more proven piece could have made the difference. And now with Njoku potentially visiting the Chargers, the clock might be running out. If he signs elsewhere, this conversation ends immediately. The Ravens move forward with what they have, and the focus shifts entirely to developing the guys already in the building. But if he doesn't sign, if that door stays even slightly open, then the pressure flips right back onto Baltimore. Because at that point, it's no longer about availability, it's about choice. Do you stick with your current group and trust that 4 tight ends are enough, even with a long season ahead and the physical demands of this offense? Or do you make a late move, bring in Njoku, and create what could be one of the deepest tight end rooms in the league, even if it means sacrificing depth elsewhere? And let's be real, Ravens fans are split on this for a reason. There's no obvious wrong answer here. It all comes down to how you value potential versus proven production. And this is exactly where things take a decisive turn for the Ravens, because once you zoom out and connect all the dots, this entire situation starts to feel less like a missed opportunity and more like a calculated decision from the front office. The Ravens didn't just hesitate on David Njoku, they actively built a scenario where bringing him in would become increasingly difficult. That's the key detail here. From the moment they chose to wait after his visit, through the draft where they added 2 new tight ends, they were quietly closing that window themselves. Now think about the message that sends inside the locker room. When you invest draft capital into players like Matthew Hibner and Josh Kays, you're not just adding bodies, you're signaling belief. You're telling those guys, we see you as part of this system. We want you to grow into something here. And if you suddenly bring in a veteran like Njoku after that, it changes the dynamic. It potentially limits reps, slows development, and creates a crowded rotation where not everyone can thrive. But at the same time, this is the NFL. Development is important, yes, but winning is everything. And that's where the internal debate probably gets intense. Because while the Ravens are clearly building towards something with this younger tight end group, they also know the window to compete is always now. When you have a roster with high expectations and a fan base that's ready for a deep playoff run, every move is magnified. Passing on a player who could immediately elevate your offense is not something you do lightly. And let's not ignore another important layer here, scheme familiarity and coaching direction. Durham Smythe wasn't brought in randomly. He has ties to Declan Doyle, which suggests the Ravens are trying to implement specific concepts that require players who already understand the system. That kind of continuity matters, especially when you're reshaping parts of your offense. So instead of bringing in someone new and adjusting around him, they're building with pieces that already fit the blueprint. That tells you this isn't just about talent, it's about alignment. And when you combine that with the fact that the team is already carrying 4 tight ends, you start to see why adding a 5th, even one as talented as Njoku, becomes a much tougher sell. Every additional player forces a compromise somewhere else, and those trade-offs can come back to haunt you later in the season. Still, there's always that what if. What if Njoku signs somewhere else and has a huge year? What if injuries hit the tight end room and suddenly that depth doesn't feel like enough? What if the offense struggles in certain matchups where a player like him could have made the difference? These are the kinds of questions that don't go away easily. They linger throughout the season, especially if things don't go exactly as planned. But if you're the Ravens, you're betting on something very specific right now. You're betting that your current group, led by Mark Andrews, supported by Smythe, and reinforced by 2 rookies, is enough. You're betting on coaching, development, and system fit over